My name's Deborah O'Neill and I'm an Academic Development Tutor in the School of Health and Life Sciences at Glasgow Caledonian University. I've put together this short vidcast to discuss writing lab reports at uni. You may or may not have some experience of writing lab reports for biology. Either way, this session should be helpful as it's designed to go through the main components of a lab report to help you be thinking about what should and should not be in each section and some of the other key skills involved in writing lab reports. We'll discuss the topics listed in turn to help you produce a high quality lab report for university. Before we start discussing and planning the different sections of the report, it's important to think about the purpose of your scientific report. And this is true of any kind of writing. If you think about what your writing is trying to achieve, what the purpose of the writing is, then it's more likely you'll stay focused on that purpose and stay on track. Lab reports are how practical experiments are written up, and their purpose is to outline the details of the experiment very clearly so that they could be repeated by anyone. This means your writing style should be clear, to the point, and above all, accurate. So when using scientific language, make sure you have the correct terms. You'll also have to analyse the findings and interpret what they mean. If you want to work in a practical lab setting when you leave university, you'll have to write lab reports which could possibly determine the direction that research will take. It is a vital skill for bio students, and the sooner you put in the work to master writing them, the better it will be for both you as a student and for your career after university. You'll usually be given a schedule which will outline what is expected of you in the practical experiment. Schedules generally tell you what materials will be used, what the aim of the practical work is, and what you will actually do in the experiment. For example, you may be told something like this. The schedule may also guide the structure of your report, so pay close attention to what it tells you to do. Essays, lab reports, presentations and exams differ greatly in structure and content, and how you'll approach each assessment may be different, but they all share a common theme: planning. The planning stage for all types of assessments is vital, and lab reports are no different. Before the lab takes place, read up on exactly what you'll be doing. Reading the details of the experiment to make sure you understand them before you go to the practical class is crucial, as you'll get much more out of the class if you turn up prepared. This may sound really obvious, but it's something often overlooked by students who just want to get on with the practical experiments. You will get so much more from the experience if you prepare for it properly. Time management is key to this, and planning is usually the first thing to go when students are pushed for time, so try and make sure this doesn't happen to you. It's also very clear to a marker when an assignment hasn't been planned out properly, as the structure, the quality of academic writing and critical thought is generally weaker when assignments haven't been fully planned out. Highlighting the key sections of the instructions in the schedule will help you focus on the crucial parts of the experiment. Think carefully about the instructions. Have you been told to present the results in a specific way or include a particular piece of information? If so, make sure you follow the guidelines to the letter. Also, you should read the background material beforehand so that you understand the context of what you're doing and why it's important. This will also help you understand what has been done previously in the area and will help you with writing the different sections of your report, particularly the introduction section. Here is an example of the instructions that have been given to students writing a first year university lab report. If you look at this example, you can see that marks are designated for each section. This lets you know how much detail you will require for each different part. For example, you should know that you'll be expected to give more detailed explanations and critique for a section worth 5 marks than you would for a section worth 1 mark. Also note, in this example we're told that the results should be shown graphically, so that you know that you have to produce a graph to show the results in a clear way. You should not expect to be given this level of detailed direction in all of your reports, and so be aware that as you progress through the programme, you'll have to make these decisions on the details that you include by yourself. Some reports you come across may differ slightly. Some may combine the title and introduction sections, and also the discussions and conclusion sections can be combined. Generally, however, the structure listed here is the form your lab reports will take at university. Your programme and module have the final say on this, however, so follow the guidelines they give you very carefully. We'll now go through each section in detail and discuss what it should and should not contain. The title lets the reader know exactly what to expect in the report. If you're not given a title, keep in mind that your title should be clear, to the point and not ambiguous. Try not to let this stress you out too much though, and remember that you're not writing a short story where you're trying to keep the reader in the dark, so the title should let the reader know exactly what the experiment was about. Here are some examples. Your introduction should give the background and context to the work being done, so basically what has been done in this area before and what are you doing in your study. Has previous work led to the work you're doing, for example? You have to demonstrate that you know about what you're doing and that you can link it to past work to show how you're building upon it, challenging it, or adding to knowledge in that area. You have to introduce the reader to the topic and not assume knowledge on their part. You should also outline why this is an important issue to be addressed. Your introduction should also explain why you used the methods you did and why the specific samples, etc. were chosen. You're not being asked to describe your methods here in detail, only outline why they were selected. You should also define any key terms. Make sure that when you're doing this again that you're accurate. Are there any words or terms in the title, for example, that you should define? The hypothesis should also be outlined in your introduction. A hypothesis is basically an explanation or theory that you can test by means of a specific experiment to confirm or disprove the hypothesis. An example of a hypothesis might be that people who eat cheese before bed suffer from nightmares. You would then go on to test this to prove or disprove the hypothesis, possibly by comparing people who eat cheese before bed with those who don't, to see if those who do suffer from more nightmares are the ones who eat cheese. You then have to show the link between cheese and the nightmares. A more bio-based example might be, if moisture affects the growth of seeds, then seeds that are kept moist will grow, while seeds that are kept dry will not. Again, your report would then outline if this was or was not the case. Also, what are the aims and objectives of the experiment? Regardless of what your practical is on, it's important you state what your aims were. This is an example of a very short introduction. The key things to note here that a background is given to the problem, the topic is introduced, and the reasons for the study and the aims are outlined. In your own work, you would obviously give a much fuller picture and use references throughout. In this section, you have to explain exactly what you did and everything that you used to do it. As you will already have completed the practical element, you will have had instructions on methods and materials you will use. This can often be the easiest part of the report to write. So if you're worried about getting started, perhaps you might wish to start with this section to help you get you into a flow of writing. Make sure this section includes what you did, how you did it, and what you used to do it. Think about how much detail you should provide. You can assume you're writing for an educated audience, so don't tell them absolutely everything in minute detail, but do provide enough details on techniques and materials so that the experiment could be repeated. Think about it like a recipe. You have to give accurate and adequate descriptions to allow someone else to do it, so don't simply list the equipment that you used. Again, make sure that you give accurate names and measurements. You have to use the correct scientific terms, concentrations, volumes, etc. for all chemicals, and also include any stats packages that were used for analysis purposes. Sometimes it can be tempting to start talking about your results and what they mean in this section. However, if you find yourself doing this, then just take some notes in a separate document to help you when you come to write those sections. Remember, you're not writing about what you're going to do, you're writing about something you've already done, so you'll also use the past tense to do this. You're not being asked to discuss the results in this section. You'll be describing them only, so this should also be fairly simple. However, it is the data shown that can sometimes cause problems. For example, you may have to decide whether you present your data in a table or graph. We'll discuss graphs and tables in more detail later. You will still have to present these results though, so you should also explain what the tables are showing. And this would be an example of that. Remember that each module and programme at university has many unique features, so it may be that you're asked to also interpret the results here. Again, pay close attention to the guidance you're given in your module handout. The discussion and conclusion section can often be the most difficult part of the report, as this is where you'll be using your critical thinking skills to interpret the results and decide what they actually mean. So you go beyond just saying what the results are, you have to actually interpret them here. For example, you might wish to discuss whether the results were what you expected to find, or possibly if you could compare them to any other results in this area. So you could think if there are any theories or past research that it would be appropriate to discuss here. And at all points you have to make sure that you provide references for your explanations. So don't make conclusions that aren't justified by the data presented. You wouldn't make any bold claims that you can't back up. You can also identify weaknesses in the work and suggest any changes to improve or develop the experiment. You can't simply say that human error was a cause for poor results, for example. And this would be an example of a piece of writing in a discussion section where the writer is trying to tell you what the results are and also compare them to similar studies. Here are some common mistakes that people make when writing lab reports. A very common error when students present information with graphs and tables is that they make them just too small to read. So think just because you know what it says doesn't mean the reader will. So be careful to select appropriate scales for your graphs too. Also remember that you must keep your sections separate. By this I mean that under materials and methods section, only talk about the materials and methods, don't discuss the results. If the results and discussion sections are separate, then keep them separate. Only give the results in the results section and don't interpret them there. Only do both together if you're told to do so in the instructions given by your module leader. Again, accuracy is key in lab reports. For example, if you do the experiment 3 times, you've only repeated it twice, you've not repeated it 3 times. So pay close attention to detail. And here is a checklist to consider before you hand in your report.